right, welcome in everybody to a very special Sunday sessions. Now, though I am still on sabbatical from live shows and Discord, or at least trying to be, y'all, I had to make two exceptions this weekend. And I just noticed that I did not check this camera with my shirt because the green screen is making it look a little extra magical right now. But hey, it's beautiful. At least I got my skin tone right today. So you can't win them all. You can't win them all. But anyway, on Friday night, Bertie Goodwin and I from Ichabod got together and had an incredible conversation on the movie Sinners. And listen, if you haven't seen the movie and if you haven't seen that conversation, please go see the movie before you see the conversation, because I promise you we're going to spoil the hell out of it for you. So see the movie first so we don't mess it up for you. And today we have a conversation that has been over a year in the making, y'all, because it has really just been my wife and I kind of managing the emails in between 2 full-time jobs at the time, 4 kids, and trying to keep some sanity. We could not get a date confirmed for this conversation for the longest. And ironically, it was me slowing down to kind of take this sabbatical that gave us the breathing room to finally make the connection. So I'm super grateful for that. I'm going right back into sabbatical mode right after this, but I had to come out for this weekend for these conversations. And today, man, we're going to be deconstructing biblical marriage with Dr. Jennifer Bird. I've been literally for over a year, I've been waiting to have this conversation. I'm so excited about this because marriage has been in many ways weaponized against women, children, and even men, as allegedly biblical perspectives have emerged as our societal norms. So if you haven't already, make sure to like this video, share this stream, and invite a friend to join this conversation today on biblical marriage with Dr. Bird. And y'all give me some time to learn how to use this because this is a new system. Y'all remember part of the reason that I went on sabbatical is because I'm not a production person. I'm a techie guy sometimes, but I mess this stuff up. Let's see if I get it right today. Bam, I did.
You did.
Yes. Welcome, Dr. Bird. How are you doing today?
I am well. It is really nice to be here. Thank you for I've been looking forward to this conversation also for a year. So
yes.
When you first reached out, or when Todd and I first reached out, I was like, please, let's have this conversation. Yes.
Oh,
yes.
That is awesome. Yeah. Well, listen, it's definitely a privilege to be able to meet you and to finally be able to do this. Before we jump into my list of questions, which, as you saw, I think people always see that I go overboard with everything because I start thinking.
But it's lovely because it just means that you're into it and you have such important insights. The questions are just spot on, right?
Oh, so, awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, before we jump into that, can you tell our audience a little bit about who you are, what you do, and perhaps how your perspective and experience can bring some new insight on today's subject?
Yeah. I could talk for a long time about addressing all of that, but I'll make it brief because I do want to get into the juicy stuff that we want to talk about. But the quick rundown here is I did grow up in a Christian home. United Methodist was the brand. And in my teens and 20s, I took a very sharp turn to kind of fundamentalist way of reading the Bible and thinking about theology. And that was very strong. That was a really important kind of 7 years in my world. And I read very, for the most part, literalistically, and I wanted to apply everything in the Bible, to my life and memorize scripture, that whole realm, right? And so as things go, I ended up going to seminary because I wanted to learn the biblical languages myself. It was so important to me to be able to understand what the texts were saying on my own instead of trusting someone else. So that's essentially how I ended up becoming a biblical scholar. I didn't go to seminary thinking I was going to go for a PhD. I just wanted to learn the languages. When I got there, I was like, oh, there's so much more going on here that other people need to know or hear about. And so what's the best way for me to help people do that is to get a PhD. So when I was in my first full-time teaching position right out of graduate school, I was in North Carolina when they passed an amendment to the state constitution, effectively defining marriage as between a man and a woman in the state constitution. And so that's what got me essentially on this topic specifically. yeah, is this, people, I think people watching this know, the people turn to the Bible to justify or to try to understand, what does the Bible say about this? And I'm going to try to live by it. And then people in positions of power, or in this case, in the realm of legislation, right, or the state constitution, people end up using their position of power to harm other people's lives, right? Is kind of the short, I think, the thing going on there. So I ended up trying to become a public scholar. That's what got me started. I had a Huffington Post piece that went viral on talking about this thing about marriage in the Bible and what people think it says versus what it actually does say. And so I've been working on that for the last 13 years. I've been working on this subject with people in faith communities, trying to help them see what do the texts actually say about this, and then you can figure out what you're going to do with it from there. I've been writing pieces, different types of editorials, and I created a video series actually for people in faith communities to do one topic at a time and kind of take one bite, watch this 15, 18-minute video, and then talk about it and kind of try to process it for yourself. I've just been trying to do whatever I could to help people better understand this subject. So my latest book is, yes, Marriage in the Bible, What Do the Texts Say? And it is for not just people of faith, it's for anyone, regardless of your take on this subject or even your relation to the Bible. It's very helpful for better understanding the texts and therefore what you may or may not want to do with them from there. So I hope that's a helpful intro. Did I
Oh
cover
man,
enough of my
that is
bio to?
absolutely amazing. That's perfect. Oh man, like I have so many more questions I want to ask, but I'm gonna roll some of those into part two. Because oh man, there's good stuff there, and I had never, I don't think I realized that your work was targeted towards the faith community, but I mean, man, that's where
Initially.
it is most needed,
Mhm.
and you seem to be doing a really good job at it. So that is just, to me, that's genius. And that what I love about it is my motivation in everything that I do is to try to find a way to help people. And so I
Mhm.
think that's when
Mhm.
I get really excited when I see
Mhm.
other people who are doing things. It's not just to say, hey, you all are wrong or you all are less than or anything like
Right.
that. It's,
Right.
hey, this is harmful, and let me show you the harm in
Yes.
it and show you a better way to understand it, perhaps even.
Exactly.
Yes, I love it.
Yes. Yes.
All right. So we'll jump into our first question, which I
Okay.
think this is going to be a good one. When people say biblical marriage, what are
Mhm.
they actually referring to? And is that even a coherent category? Like what is a biblical marriage? And funny, because I thought about this after I
Mhm.
deconstructed, and I
Yeah.
was like, I wouldn't ever actually want a biblical marriage. Now that I think
Right?
about it.
That's kinda scary.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so the difference between what is actually depicted in the Bible in terms of marriage and
Yes.
what people think biblical marriage, that category is, just like we've got a football field between those, right? I mean, no, they're not the same. So when people use that phrase, biblical marriage, they usually are thinking of well, when Christians use it, I should say, they are usually thinking of 4 specific passages, even if they don't know these are the passages that justify their thoughts. So those are the first 4 chapters that I do talk about in the book. So, or the first 4 chapters are dealing with each of the first 4 passages. So it's Genesis 1:28, and
Mhm.
be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. So people think that procreation is only for marriage.
Yes.
um, and then Genesis 2:24, which says, "Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and cling to his woman, and the two shall become one flesh." So but the English always says wife, cling to his wife, and so
Yeah.
people
Yes.
believe that you no sex before marriage, right? So, and then Matthew 19:4-6 is restating Genesis 2:24, and then this other piece, and it's a conversation between Jesus and some Pharisees. But the point is here, what's so fascinating about, I'm going to dive too deep. Sorry,
No,
stay on the surface
no,
for now.
come with it.
Um, well,
Go ahead.
the passage itself is that people quote. They leave out the question. Someone's asked Jesus, "For which reason are you okay with divorce?"
Yes.
nobody talks about that. And they actually use this passage to say no divorce.
Oh
Right?
man.
And
Yes.
so, yeah, and the thing is, the passage itself, if you keep reading past verse 6, which is where the quote people usually stop quoting, that's the passage, I'm sure you're familiar with this. That's the passage where Jesus throws down that eunuch gauntlet and like,
Yeah.
you know what? If you can handle it, that's the way to go. You know,
Yes.
like which
Mhm.
entirely undermines number 1, which was
Wow. Be
which is
fruitful and
appropriate,
multiply.
right?
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, literally, the 2 of the passages contradict each other,
Oh
and
my
nobody
goodness.
pays attention to. Okay, and then the 4th passage is the Ephesians 5:31 and 32, and that's the passage that was used to help set in motion the sacramental language for the church, and it's this one line, Paul or whoever's writing in his name,
Yes.
right, says, "This is a great mystery, and I'm referring to Christ and the church," and so it isn't that it was new to talk about God and the people in some sort of relationship like that, but it was new, in the way it plays out for the church is very different than the way, people had been talking about it before. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So people no divorcing, no sex outside of marriage, marriage has to be able to be procreative, those kinds of ideas are
Yeah.
just and that's really not what any of those passages is actually talking about when you look at it in
Mhm.
context.
Man. Yeah. Context really does change
It
everything.
does.
It took me years to kind of unpack this my own realization that much of my ideas about the Bible I held before I had ever even read it. I had
Yes.
these beliefs. I already knew who were the good guys, who were the bad guys, what it
Right.
said, what this meant. And if any part of me said, "Oh, that's not what it sounds like," there was already kind of like a pre-imposed apologetic for it.
That's right. How to make it go away or be okay
Yes.
with it. Yes,
Mhm.
you were yes. And the thing is you are not alone, right? I mean,
Yes.
you're saying it out loud, but so many
Mhm.
people don't even realize, right?
Yes.
And as you
Yes.
as you said, it took you a while to realize it. Me too, right?
Mhm.
And so many
Yep.
people, even if they're not like really extreme fundamentalists, but just kind of in middle of the road even, don't even
Yes.
realize the extent to which they've been given this framework or this is what it means,
Yes.
and so for someone like you to come along and raise a question, it's like, "What? You're questioning the whole framework here, dude,"
Yeah. Oh
Yes.
my goodness.
Yes.
Well, like I went through a divorce, and then when I actually deconverted, because I was
Mm.
actively a pastor at the time, my former wife was a first lady. Um, like her seeing me as an atheist, that was just not something that was going to work very well. In her mind, to this day, I am a devil worshiper. So
Oh, I'm so
I was,
sorry.
yes, it
I'm
was
so
not,
sorry.
not a great experience.
No.
But I had to recalibrate my views toward
Mhm.
marriage before I got
Mhm.
married again.
Yeah, sure.
And at around the same time, I was already kind of recalibrating my views on social justice, recalibrating my views on other people's sexuality and why I probably shouldn't even have an opinion.
Right,
And so,
right. Why does it
so,
matter to us,
you know,
right?
and
Yes.
so I was getting to that place, and I was like, okay, well, before I get married again, like my whole approach to marriage has been based off of my religion and my idea of ministry. Like the reason I got married the first time was because as a pastor, it was taboo not to
Not
be
to
married.
be. Yes.
And
Yes.
this, I began to realize like the idea was I'm a uncontrollable lust filled
Right?
beast who can't be a single man and in
Right?
charge of all of those people. And
Right.
so I was like, oh man, these are probably not very mature places to build my personality and behavior out of. So let's reapproach this. And so when I was dating my current wife, and I said the thing that we're gonna do. Actually, it was right after we got married, because here's something most people don't know. Even though I was an atheist, I did not tell her when we started dating.
Oh,
I told her that I had stopped pastoring,
uh-huh.
but I was still actively involved in churches.
Okay.
I just was no longer preaching.
Okay.
And so after we got married, I was like, oh man, it's still early enough to get an annulment. So I think I need to tell her that I'm an atheist. Because it kind of feels wrong. I feel like
Yeah.
I've trapped her
Yeah.
into something. So
Yeah.
And I did. I had a conversation with her. I said, okay, babe, I got to tell you this. I don't know how you're going to respond, because her mother's an evangelist, her grandmother's an evangelist.
Gotcha. Yep.
And that's why I'm like, babe, I'm an atheist, and it's not a phase, it's not a trend. This is where I am.
This is real. Yeah.
And if you want to divorce me, I would completely understand, because I should have told you in advance. And she was like, boy, get out of here with that. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So all right, we're good there.
Okay.
We're good there. But then I said, okay, so because that I needed to get that out to tell her the next part, and that is, I can't hold you to this Eve thing. It does not make sense to me for anybody to be living under the judgment of someone, number one, who I don't even believe existed. But even if I was going to go that far, if I was going to say, if this person did exist, for you to still, for me to hold you accountable to something that they did that I don't even understand why it's wrong in the first place. I don't know them. All I know is you. It seems to be very unfair to you for me to tell you that because someone else ate a fruit and fell from grace, that you now have to be less than me, that your opinions have to be seconded to mine. It's just like, and I realized, like, that's not even a healthy way to do relationship. That's right. And that was one of the reasons that me and my first wife struggled so much, because ever since, like, I saw a movie when I was a kid called Coming to America. And there's this scene where his wife is like just trying to do whatever he wants her to do. And he's like, that's not what I want. So I want to go find another wife. That made an impression on me. And so I've always wanted partnership, and religion didn't give me permission to seek that out. And so that was a very interesting thing,
Yeah.
Oh man. So I didn't mean for us to go that deep off of that one question.
That's okay.
But that's good. All right, so Paul's writings are often cited as prescriptive for marriage. What are we missing when we're reading those through a modern lens?
Again, as I'm chuckling, because each question we could spend almost an hour talking about. Yeah. So the quick and dirty, the short version here. There are two different thoughts in my mind when I saw that question and thought about having this conversation with you. One is that people. This isn't really the question you asked, but it's tangential to it, I guess. But it's like Paul and Jesus, the way they are depicted, have radically different views on marriage and divorce. And I think that is an important thing to note. Okay, so there's that. Jesus is totally fine with divorce. Well, he's not actually totally fine with it. He's okay with it. He doesn't say not to divorce. And Paul, Paul does Paul even talk about divorce? Doesn't matter. Let's stick to what he is saying. So there's that. Also, Jesus is totally fine with levirate marriage, and he's totally fine. Like they're all the things that like Jesus is okay with. He also thinks it's okay. It's a good idea the way he's depicted. It's a good idea to become a eunuch if you can handle it. All of those things. And Paul is over here saying, if passions are more, if you are not able to control yourself, if you are not, which is shorthand for saying, if you're not a mature, like proper man, right? Because he's talking to men. If you're not a proper man and you can't control yourself, then okay, you can get married, because that will give you an outlet for the passion, not a place to enjoy it, right? He's down on passion, as were many other philosophical people of the time, right? So, and long before him. So this is one of the reasons people want to talk about various philosophical groups and how they may have had an influence on Paul or help us understand some of Paul's language. This is one of the key places for it. I don't know about you, Darante, but I went to college with people who got married because they couldn't handle like not having sex. Like that's why, right? Like that's why they got married. Is we want to have sex so bad, but we can't have sex outside of marriage, so let's get married. And like, what and it's we misunderstood this passage, right? So. Yes, so plenty of people. You did, plenty of people. I remember anyway. So we could. So what do we miss about Paul? Paul is. We misunderstand this issue, and that's really an important issue. The other thing I think is fascinating is the one in that same passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, when he's talking about someone has posed a question to him: is it better for a man not to have sex? Is it better for a man not to touch a woman? Right. Yeah. And he's like, well, yeah. But for all these reasons, we'll give some concessions and yada, yada, so he is in a sense anti-marriage.
Mhm.
Right? He is
Yep.
anti bodily pleasure. He
Mhm.
is anti all of those things. And so, we've got two guys who are depicted as single giving the church sex advice,
Come on,
like
man.
what?
Yes.
And this is the other thing I'll just kind of, for this question at least, the thing that hit home the hardest for me as I started many years ago when I was working on this project and working on all the different content and what is it we want to say and help people see, that within the biblical context, when you're talking about marriage, if people are talking about the relationship, they're talking about sex,
Yeah. Yes.
right? And
Mhm.
so no wonder so many people of faith
Man.
can't get beyond that,
Yep.
right?
Oh, thank you for saying that.
You're
Yes.
welcome. But so, part of me is like, so let's have some compassion on people who do see it this way. And I used to, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
let's understand why people believe that. Well, the texts only talk about that if they're talking,
Man.
the heading on chapter 7 in First Corinthians in Bibles will say something about advice on marriage. I'm like,
Mhm.
this isn't marriage advice. This is about sex or not. That's
That's
it.
right.
Right? This is
Yes.
not marriage. This is not good marriage advice. Like, what is the top 5 pieces of advice you give someone? Communication, right?
Come
You
on
know what I
now.
mean? Like,
Yes. Oh
having
my
having
goodness.
great intimacy might be on that top 5, but
Yes.
what? So,
Oh.
yeah, those are my takeaways
Mm.
on Paul. We
Oh.
misunderstand the passion. We also misunderstand that he and Jesus are depicted very much in the Hebrew Bible realm of things, which is
Yes.
anytime you're talking about this paired up relationship, it's revolving around this
Yep.
piece, and that's
Yep.
it, right?
And when I one of the thoughts that I pull from that is how much our misunderstandings of this have reduced marriage to sex.
Exactly.
And again,
Precisely.
it took me coming out the second time. I was so thankful for you to say that. It took me realizing like, oh, like, because for me, I lived by that scripture. It's better to marry than to burn. It is.
Totally.
I gave that advice so
I
much,
bet you did.
like, oh my goodness. And
Yeah,
then afterwards, I realized, so like, oh, I have literally reduced marriage
that's right.
to sex.
That's right.
It is solely about having the right to have sex. That's it.
Right. Right.
It's not about knowing if this person matches my rhythm, my pacing, if we're
Right.
moving in the right direction, same direction, if
Right.
we want similar things. Those are
Do
not even conversation. Is do we believe in the same voodoo man and can you know and it's just
Yeah.
like wow. And it gets crazy. I was editing a video for a friend maybe about 5 years ago, and it was a video of couples talking about who had been married for a while,
Mhm.
talking about that what had kept them together. And I was
Mm.
editing the video, and I called my wife and I said, "Baby, you got to come watch this." And
Aw.
it seemed beautiful because the lady was like, "I knew it from the first time I saw him." And the interviewer, he was like, "How did you know he was the one?" And she was like, "Because his clothes matched." And I was like, "This is scary." I was like, "This is scary. This is why we don't know what to do in marriages anymore."
Yeah.
It frightened me because I
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it just hit me that that's what happens
Mhm.
when marriage just gets reduced to the legal right to have sex. Then the standards of marriage just becomes, what can I tolerate? What is the very smallest thing I'm looking
Right.
for? It just becomes attraction. Am I attracted to you
That's right.
visibly?
That's
That's it.
right.
That's all
That
that matters.
that's right.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and so much of the Bible teaches us to think that way.
Mhm.
I'm gonna keep saying it,
I
I
love it.
remember and even when it comes to the book Song of Songs, which is lovely that it's in there, right? Because it's
Yes.
celebrating sex and sexuality and sensuality, and sure, they enjoy each other, they love the looks of each other. I think that's all great, but
Yep.
even the book Song of Songs is really shallow, right?
Yes.
It doesn't talk
Yes.
about intellectual stimulation and how some people are actually turned on by that. Like, it doesn't
Come
talk
on
about
now.
real people.
Yes.
So I love that it's in there, and it is
Oh man.
still and I actually had to have a student point that out to me. I love it when that happens. I'm like, I hadn't thought about that. You're right. It's still
Yes.
very surfacey,
Oh my goodness.
lustful or, enjoying, but
Yes.
so anyway.
Mm. Oh man. Which maybe that's one of the reasons the Bible is attractive to young teenage boys. It's uh, oh my
Ooh.
goodness. There's more than a few chapters in there that could qualify.
Uh-huh.
All
Uh-huh.
right. So my next question for you today.
Yes. Yes.
How do you respond to people who say God defined marriage, especially given how marriage has changed across time and
Mm.
culture?
Yeah. Yeah, that's an important little especially that you added on there, right?
Yes.
Right, because your questions in a sense answer themselves, I think, it was just kind of fun. But also, yeah, this is a human institution. So,
Hmm.
how do I respond? I mean, internally, I kinda chuckle,
Yeah.
like, I try not to I can have a good poker face when I know I need to, but when I'm caught off
Yes.
guard, I do not have a poker face. It's really
That's me.
is
That's
that
me. Oh
yeah,
my
yeah, yeah,
goodness.
right? You can relate.
Mhm.
So I worry about that, but, you know, I I understand. I think that's the approach I try to take. I understand why you think that that's the case, right? I
Yeah.
understand why you think that the scriptures tell us that or something like that. Like, I get that, people read Genesis 1:28 and think that that's about marriage, but the passage itself isn't actually about marriage. And if depending on context, I'll say, well, for instance, when it says there in 128 to be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, that doesn't mean it's about marriage, because if you look at verse 22 of Genesis 1, God tells the fish of the sea to be fruitful and multiply. Like,
Wow.
that's not about marriage there, is
That's
it?
right. That's right.
And so why do we
Yes.
think it is? Well, we think it is because of so many years, 3,000 years of tradition.
Yeah.
Men way before Jesus came on the scene, men were making that assumption. Men were putting that idea onto that passage
Yeah.
and onto Genesis 2:24. Neither
Wow.
one of those is talking about the institution that we call marriage. I do think Genesis 2 is talking about pairing up. And I do think it is trying to give a story to to wrestle with, or a story for children, essentially, to
Yeah.
see this is a thing. Most people, not everyone, but most people want to find a person and
Yes.
strike out on their own, and
Oh,
that's a good thing. But that isn't the same thing as saying this is about marriage, because the
right.
marriage piece is, as you just so beautifully said, Durante, it has changed over the centuries, and really, it isn't until the mid-19th century that we got into this idea of love.
Wow.
Marriage was a pact, it was political, it was economic, it was survival, right? It was a
Yes.
way to survive.
Yes.
And it isn't until the 1850s or so that we get this concept of my soulmate, my
Right.
partner, so,
That's interesting. And like I had never noticed that particular aspect, especially the correlation of, yeah, the love piece doesn't come in until much later.
Mhm.
But we can see the same thing with religious theology, because I often remind people that, like, the children of Israel wouldn't have saw their system as a religious system. It would have been a
Right.
governmental system.
That's right.
These were their politics.
That's right.
This idea of a personal God who loves me and loves my soul. This comes on the scene. This is a recent invention.
That's
This
right. I agree with you, absolutely. Yep.
oh man.
Yeah. And that's a really, I mean, you've brought up a really interesting point about the way God is interwoven in those
Mhm.
laws, for sure, right? Is
Yes.
the one who is kind of holding the upright here. But yeah, no, it's right. That's right. It's not religious so much in the way we
You
think of
know,
it.
and it's so it's much. We have this temptation because we see this. It's an issue in anthropology as well. That if we see an image, we discover something. If that image looks familiar to us, even though we know we have no connection to the image, the people of the image, we don't
Mm.
know any of the context around the image. If the image is familiar to us, we will anachronistically impose our familiarity on the image and feel no need to go, and we'll just say, hey, we found out these people did the same thing we did. And then it'll be years later and we'll find out, no, actually there was like one mark missing from that piece, and this was something totally different going on,
Yes. Yes. What was the motivation? Was it a joke? Right? I
right.
mean,
Yes.
that's the part, yeah, that's the thing I love about getting people to think about genre. Like, what if some
Yes.
of this was actually, like, sarcasm?
Come on. Yes. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Right? I mean,
Especially when you read through some of the stuff from the prophets. I mean, it
yeah.
feels like
Oh,
sarcasm.
it
Yikes.
that's a great point, though. It's I read it so seriously and heavy and negative, but I think we could read it as like, hello, people.
Yep.
It would actually be more tolerable. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's a really interesting point.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a heavy question next because
Okay.
this is from my sociological section of questions.
Okay.
What impact has the church's framing of gender roles in marriage had on real life relationships, particularly for women and queer folk?
Yeah. I'm gonna have to look at that question again because you've read it, but I just want to what
Absolutely.
impact has the church's framing of gender roles in marriage had? Oh, it's so painful. This was another one of those questions where, excuse me, where I was like, we could just turn your question into a statement, right?
Yes.
You're, because you have seen it, it, right, Darante? Like you didn't.
Yes.
I mean, the church's framing of gender roles is it's powerful, right? The patriarchal norms, the trad wife kind of idea. It's it's deep. And the thing is, I lived in the Northwest for about 8 years. And when I moved back to Virginia a few years ago, it's where I grew up, and so I had to work hard to get rid of the patriarchal sexist thinking about myself, even, and all of that. And I'm back in the stew, and it's just gross. It's hard. It's all around me. And I'm giving in to some of it, and it's like, oh my gosh. And I also really appreciate that you said in the introduction, that this also impacts men negatively. It's not just the women. It is the women have not, it's a different form. And I think from historically speaking, the women's situation needs to be talked about more in a sense, but everybody loses, right? Everybody loses if somebody has to be in charge and constantly on to manage his household. And to have that superiority and to that, like, you're losing because you don't get to have the partnership, right?
That's right.
And that is the stress. That is stress. And so, and the submission piece, the way the idea of, the way the expectations of women are so demure and quiet. And I remember the first time I kind of had the consciousness about that passage in First Peter where it says, a gentle and quiet spirit is of great worth, in God's life. And I just, the first time I was like, I don't have a gentle and quiet spirit.
Oh, wow.
So what does that mean for me? And yeah, so I mean, all of the pieces, right? It is biblical and it is within the church setting, and people behave according to it. But it's spread. It is not just within the church, community. Even I feel it going to work. I going to the grocery store. I experience the issues of gender role. Conformity and expectations, and I'm a cis hetero woman. Like, I'm not a queer woman. So the realities, when I think about what people who have had to survive, or the ways they've had to survive, or what growing up in a family that they didn't know would accept them, so they didn't come out, all the things, like you didn't know one way or the other, or they knew pretty well that they wouldn't be, and all of that, right? It's just so harmful to well-being, and unnecessarily so, it seems to me.
And it's yikes, your answer just for one moment I almost started crying, because I was like, it's not, you're right, it's not just women and children, it's not just queer folk, this is humanity. This has impacted our sense of humanity, how we treat each other. Thinking back through over my own life, being afraid to treat any male who may have seemed not masculine, to be able to treat him nice, because if I treat him nice, I might be accused of being like him by all of my good Christian overlords, and so I gotta make sure I'm pleasing, make sure they're okay.
Toe in the line here. Mhm.
that it took me, it was the year I deconverted that I actually wrestled with that for the first time,
Mhm.
because I had
Mhm.
two people in my church that I called apparently gay. I say they, to me, they were apparently gay. Like, you look at me like, yeah,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
they
Yeah.
appear to be so. But I hired both of them. The first one I hired, 40% of my church left
Oh, my
after
word.
I hired. And the person, again, they were not out of the closet. They didn't dress like a, they didn't cross dress or anything like that. They didn't
Uh-huh.
dress like a female. They were looked like a man. They just were apparently gay. Loved the Lord with all their heart. Led the music. 40% of my church decided, nope, that's too much for me.
Mhm.
Luckily, my team stayed on, so I was like, all
Mhm.
right, we'll keep rolling and we'll keep rebuilding. That person didn't work out long term, and I had to hire somebody else. And I decided, the next person who was available also was apparently gay, and I said, we've already lost 40%. I don't know what else we can lose. But that person actually did very well at my church, and to me, they were a little
Mhm.
more flamboyant than the other person. But our church actually built up,
Mhm.
and they felt very welcome at our church. I think most of the people in our church kind of knew they were gay. But
Mhm.
when I was deconverting, I asked myself a very specific question. I said, Durante, you'd get up in the pulpit and preach that you don't care about what anybody smoked, you don't care about what they drink. You have
Mhm.
platformed everybody's humanity except for this one member of your church who you
Mm.
call a friend. And not
Mhm.
one of your services and not one of your messages, you platformed almost every sin that is out there. But when it comes to his, you're still silent. Not one Sunday. And I was sitting, I was like, why would I do that? Why would I, being the person that I am, I don't have a problem with him being gay. Why would I do that? Why would I protect everybody else and
Mhm.
only protect him in a don't ask, don't tell type of situation? As long as we don't have to talk about it. And that's, I begin to realize, like, I'm actually preventing him from being able to bring his authentic self
Mhm.
to the
Mhm.
relationship.
Mhm.
And so, and I realized, like, and it was a shameful moment for me. And
Mhm.
it was just because of a line in a dusty book. That's
Mhm.
literally it. That's the only reason
Mhm.
I'm afraid to platform my friend. It's
Mhm.
not even because I care, which
Mhm.
makes it even more disingenuous, because I didn't care. That's the
Mhm.
reason I didn't care about the people who smoked or the people who drink or the people who was at the club the night
Mhm.
before that,
Mhm.
because I felt as a good believer at the time that it wasn't for me to judge you, but because of these few lines in scripture that I
Mhm.
had read these few times and didn't even have the context of, and that's the whole truth. I was going off of somebody else's interpretation, but I had been willing to rob him of his humanity. And then even further than that, and I'm glad you mentioned it, I was willing to thwart my own humanity. I viewed myself as sexually irresponsible the majority of my life, and that there was nothing I could do about it. That I'm
Mm.
a raging hypersexual person because that's how God made us, and men, we just can't change that. This is why David, when he died, they put a girl in the bed to see if he was really dead. And it was just like, that's just how the Lord made us. And then it wasn't until I got my first degree in sociology that I realized, oh, bruh, no, that's indoctrination. Let's unpack a little bit of this, because none of this is really based or grounded in reason, and you need some help now. you know?
Good for you.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Right.
It's it
Oh,
it gets in deep, right? Into the way we think and the way we process the world. It's yeah.
oh man. Oh man. So many things become normalized that you don't recognize becoming normalized. You don't realize how masculinity becomes toxic,
Right.
or
Yeah.
even how women get used against each other. Because I can think about just the way my mother and my grandmother sometimes would treat their daughters and treat other women in the church and stuff like
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
But and it's things that we often forget. And I it's something that's so heartbreaking when you watch somebody do something to somebody else that absolutely probably hurt them when it was done to them. But and
Mhm.
and that
Mhm.
reminds you that they've just been convinced that no, this is the way of the world and there's no escaping it. And that's why I'm so grateful that there are people out here who are actually highlighting this, that they, even if you're still a part of that system, you don't have to live this way. We can actually show you what this
Mhm.
really says.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so you don't have to tie yourself into somebody else's misinformation. There's nothing wrong from moving on from the misunderstandings of our past, and I think that's a very liberating work. So let me ask you this, and I think this is one of them that may have even came in the chat too. I think Kyle may have asked this. What actually is a healthy marriage? Like, what does a truly healthy marriage mean to you, and how does that differ from most? I don't even want to just say biblical portrayals. How does that differ from most popular portrayals? Because I think we have this biblical romanticism, and then we also have this media romanticism, and it's almost like both of those become twin flames of destroying expectations in relationships, of bringing some of the most insane standards into the marriage. So, in your mind, like, what does a truly healthy marriage even mean?
Well, I should note I have never been married.
Oh.
So, it's kind of a funny thing, right, that I'm doing this particular topic, but I don't think you have to be married in order to have a certainly in terms of the biblical text. But so I feel like I'm happy to answer the question.
Yes.
And my perception of healthy marriages versus those that are very dysfunctional, right?
Yeah.
Start with communication.
Yes.
I just can't. There's certain marriages that I'm getting to see up close that I hadn't been that I've watched from afar for a while, and I'm seeing them up close now, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you two are think you're reading each other's minds, and you are not. You are not asking the question. You are not finding out what is actually going on in this moment. You're assuming, and you're right. So that's my top: communication, right? Openness, honesty, vulnerability, humility, like all those things that make for just good relationships. And I don't know what, the thing that makes a marriage special and different beyond just relationship, right? It's you're sharing things. You are doing things together. You are each other's person. You share the memories. You go through the trials together, the joys. Like, it's a beautiful thing, right? For those who want to be in it. But yeah, I think it's about being a decent human being, right?
Yes.
And wanting that for your person as well, wanting the best for your person, and wherever that takes you, I think.
What's so funny is I feel like that was the best answer in the world, because most people perform better in their friendships than they do their marriages. They invest more of themselves in their friendships than they do their marriages. And it's because the thing that we kind of hit earlier, that in this biblical perspective, marriages got reduced to the license to have someone to have sex with, and that has robbed us of actually even choosing someone based off of, can I communicate with this person?
Right. Do I want to communicate with this person?
Do we have similar ideals about life? And it becomes, I've noticed one of the romanticisms that I see people bring in marriage is that marriage is the one place that I could be the least careful with how I talk to the person I'm with. And I'm like, oh, that's so unfortunate, because then you're not really even, wow, like if you're gonna have a relationship that's close, that is that close, you're together that much time, you want it to be enjoyable. You want it to be something that is not even just enjoyable, but productive. And I don't think that's something we often bring to our conversations about marriage. Is how does this relationship actually make me better? Not even just how does it make me happy, how does it make me better? Or have I made this person a roommate that I get to have sex with? Is that if that's probably, I mean, if that's what you want, that's fine, because and that's why I say I think your answer was the best answer, because once moving away from these biblical standards or even media standards, we realize, like, it's your choice. That's what most people overlook when dealing with these relationships. Nobody else can tell you what's going to make you happy, so no one else can tell you who's gonna work out for you or what your marriage should look like. It's an experiment for you and that other person, and you don't get, like, there's no shortcuts, there's no easy way out. That's why communication is the really big thing, I used to rail against the 5 love languages. I don't rail against it as much, but I'm like, your love language should be whatever language you both speak and have
Yeah.
agreed to speak.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
not give yourself excuse or permission not to talk, because it's going to be so important. It's, oh my goodness. But ultimately, I think sometimes, and it's not even the Bible, and that's what I love about your work, but what irresponsible theologians have often done with the Bible have reduced marriage to checking off these boxes, as instead of building an actual relationship with this person that you're interested in and figuring out if it's going to work. Like, you can do the math. There's nothing wrong with doing the math, you know?
Right. Yeah. And the one other thing I want to tag on to this particular question is, I'm certain that the people watching this know this, but I just want to say it, right?
Yeah.
The marriages that are depicted in the Bible, women do not have a voice, or if or when they do, it is still in service to the patriarchal needs, the needs of the patriarchy. So people like to say, well, Sarah forced Abraham to go into Hagar, right? Like, it's all Sarah's fault. I'm like, can we talk about who wrote this narrative, please?
Come on now.
Right? And like you were saying a minute ago, the way women are pitted against each other in this kind of a system. And so, what was Sarah's choice? I'm not justifying at all the treatment of Hagar, by the way, but there's a system going on here, and there's the historical context and all this stuff. But so she has a voice, but it's still doing harm.
Come on.
I just, when do women get to have a say in their partnering up, right? Rebecca seemed to be into Jacob, like sorry, Isaac. But that's good for her, because she didn't have a choice.
Just worked out.
It worked out nicely. Yeah.
Right. Twice a day.
Right. And the way that men get to make decisions. One of the things I've been struggling with this past week, I had an encounter at the gym with a guy who was acting very entitled toward me and telling me to do things. And not that all men behave this way, but the entitlement of men over women and their bodies is also a part of what we see in the biblical stories. And it's why I rail against it so strongly internally. And I took everything in me to not punch him in the face.
Come on.
And you know what I mean? And I'm like, well, I'm going to lose this fight, so I'm not going to do it. And I'm in a gym, like, what, but I want to so badly. It gets me in the very core of my being when men behave that way.
Yes.
And that is also being modeled over and over and over again in this biblical.
On a political stage at this moment, it's becoming the standard of good American manhood. And that is terrifying.
It is terrifying. And it is why people don't see things like, the abortion bans as actually autonomy issues, right? They just don't see it.
It took me autonomy issues was a whole nother thing that it took me a while to realize. Like, I had to ask myself, like, man, why do I have an opinion on what other people wear? Why do I have I have way too many opinions about stuff that I really don't even give a damn about. Like, this, like, I'm gonna forget about it as soon as I move on. I don't really care about this stuff. Let me shut my mouth. Like, it took me a while to develop that type of discipline. Excuse me, and that type of sense of awareness that, like, it's not even my place, and especially, like, I have 2 daughters, and so I constantly have to remind myself, like, hey, like, you don't get to police them. They're not your property. Your children don't. That's not how that works. They are having their own human experience.
That's right.
They are not just human beings. They are humans becoming, and you don't get to choose that. And that was actually a liberating thing.
Yeah. Good. Yeah.
It was a lot of pressure of trying to think that you're solely responsible for who they become. And it's just like, no, I'm a part. I can help guide. But if I take on the pressure of trying to define their lives, like, I just don't have that superpower. Like, I just don't. I'm gonna drive myself crazy.
And them.
So, yes. And so after a while, it was just like, it's not healthy. It's bad math. And it doesn't take much to look over culture to realize that things that we think are morally objective are quickly become morally subjective. What type of person would wear this outside? What man would wear a dress? Jesus wore a dress. They all did back then, you know?
Yeah, right.
You know? And so it just becomes like, oh no, I don't even want to ever go back to that place again, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But it's done so much damage.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
The heteronormativity has been really quite powerful over the millennia.
Yes.
I just saw a bumper sticker yesterday. It said, "It's not about the bathrooms. It wasn't about the water fountains."
Come on. Yes.
Right? It's not. It's about people not understanding, not getting, and needing somehow to be comfortable with someone else's reality. Like your someone else's reality is not your business, but we're making it that somehow. So
yes,
it takes different forms, of course, over this. But this whole the whole heteronormative thing is really it's a problem.
Oh man, we have had such an incredible conversation. We packed a lot in this hour. I knew this was going to be exciting. I knew it was. I did get one super chat question that I wanted to bring to you, and it's from Marky Mark. Mark, please let me know if I'm wrong for calling you Marky Mark. That I do that. I see a name, if it reminds me of a celebrity,
it goes out. There. Yeah.
But I love Mark. Mark is really close to us. He's a huge supporter of what we're doing with Bridge City.
Nice.
Incredible communicator. I see him and Kyle have been in the chat like this whole time, and it's beautiful. So he says, for $4.99, thank you, Mark, man. I hope that the definition of a catamite, make sure I'm reading it right, catamite will be addressed and its pederastic implications. Now, does that give you any thoughts? Now, Mark, you may have to follow up.
I am the pederastic. I'm not sure the first term that was used there, and I was looking for the question itself, and I didn't, and I guess I didn't scroll back far enough. But here's a thing. I'm nervous. I'm a little nervous about the way people have been doing this thing about the ancient Romans and Greeks and Romans, because really what we do see happening on a certain level is a form of bisexuality, right? And people abusing positions of power. Absolutely. I am not naive about that.
Right.
But I also think that there's an element of they're different from us. They were doing this thing that is so terrible and something that we don't see happening today.
Yes.
But don't we?
Come on. Yeah.
Come on now. Come on now. We're putting all these celebrities on trial for doing exactly that.
Yes, that is such a great point.
Thank you. So, so people, this word is a terrible sounding word, and it's for a terrible thing. I agree, right? Abusing someone's, but I don't like saying all the words out loud sometimes.
No, trust me, I get it.
So yeah, there's an abuse of power, and it had, as far as we know, there we go. Yeah.
I had to find it.
Thank you for that. Yeah. So I do think that's a problem, but it's also, I'm not sure what I'm trying to say at this point. Pederastic implications, right? So people who don't necessarily know, this is the practice that this is how we label the practice of an older man established in society, taking a younger man, often effeminate, so maybe pre-puberty or just, still kind of developing, taking him under his wing and introducing him to the world, but also taking advantage of him physically and sexually. And there are debates about whether anyone in that situation could actually enjoy that or just roll with it because it gets plugged in. Like, people discuss that, so it's,
oh my goodness,
it's harm, it's abuse, it's
absolutely.
And people don't see the current manifestations the same way. So that's why I get it. I think that's why I get my hackles up about the labels and things. So I'm not sure what a catamite is.
I went
Um,
ahead and looked it
thank
up.
you.
But it's in ancient Greece and Rome. A Catamite was just a pubescent boy who was the intimate companion of the older male. So he's the
Yep.
boy in
What
the
I just
pederasty
described.
relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
So
certainly a
wow.
problem.
Now until you brought it up to the modern term, and we'll wrap it up in a few because I know you got to go. But until you brought it up in the modern term, I didn't think about like my mind went to some of the easy places, like the low hanging fruit is Catholic Church. Bam, mine went there
Right.
immediately.
Of course.
But then I started thinking, like, actually, I was a part of the megachurch movement, and actually, one of my mentors
Mm.
died in the midst of disgrace
Mm.
within a scandal. Now his church recovered, but
Okay.
he never did, and his
Yeah.
health actually ended up deteriorating after there. His name was Bishop Eddie L. Long.
Okay.
He got caught up in a scandal where he was accused of having younger male companions.
Okay.
Now they weren't necessarily underage, but just the fact that they were younger and
Mhm.
male
Mhm.
was enough, especially
Right.
considering that he was evangelical, and so he
Yeah.
preached against homosexuality pretty hard.
Right.
But not only that, I've seen that practice in more than just one or two churches.
Mhm.
I've seen quite a few situations where successful pastors will have something, and there's a term for it, and we say it tongue in cheek. It's always a joke. It's like, oh, such and such has a houseboy.
Oh, wow.
And it almost always is someone who is what I described earlier as
Mhm.
apparently gay, which is
Mhm. Mhm.
an effeminate man.
Mhm.
It is something that I started noticing when I was very young, seeing that, and I never made the implications of towards pederasty,
Mhm.
even when I start discovering those type of things. But I think again, it's that time distance. That's way back then. It was a different culture, you know. And it's like, nope, that is still going on right now, and that's
Mhm.
amazing to me. That's
Mhm.
amazing. Yikes. Well, Mark, thank you for that
Yeah.
question.
Great question.
You gave us something to think about for sure. Dr. Bird, it has
Yes,
been
sir.
an absolute privilege and pleasure talking to you today. I didn't realize we were going to laugh as much, so that
Oh,
makes me
good.
feel really good. So
It's
I
fun when
love
they get
that.
to laugh.
Yes. Before we go, do you have any last words for us? Anything coming up that you want to shill out or anything?
Oh,
I'm
thank
gonna give
you.
you the floor a little bit.
Okay. Well, I am working on creating videos that will kind of add up to being, my introduction to the Bible that I did in classes, in person, like face-to-face classes, and so I'm creating creating one video at a time. So, I've been working on this for a while. If people who have followed some of my work will know, I've been talking about this for a while, but I'm finally getting to the place where I'm gonna have the Paul piece completed in the next week or so. It turned out to be a much bigger project, this video did, than I had anticipated. So those are going to be available to rent or purchase on my website, which is jennifergracebird.com. And I am in the process of working on that video. I'm also started finally working on the book. Before reading Paul's letters, read this, which is my introduction to Paul, and more of a kind of what we were talking about earlier. We've been told how to handle all these scriptures and how to read these things, and so this is actually kind of a deconstruction of how people have been taught to think about Paul and read Paul and engage or apply what's in Paul's letters. So it's, looking at all these different things before you go read. And so that you kind of have these tools in mind, or, tools at hand, essentially, for when you do read Paul's letters. So that'll probably be next summer before that comes out, but I'm very excited about getting that rolling. So yeah, what you
All
can look
right.
for. Yeah. Yeah,
Yay.
thank you. This is such a fun conversation with you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh man.
I remember when I first heard about you, I thought, I hope you and your wife do like weekend retreats or something, helping other people to
Oh
like
wow.
think about their relationships more
Oh
in a more
man.
healthy way. I mean, I was in tears when I heard about what the two of you are doing, who
Wow.
you are, and how seriously you've been taking that,
Wow.
deconstruction piece, but around relationships. And so
Yes.
I'm plugging it now for you, that I do hope
Yay.
that, I don't know, that there's more than just a stream kind of a thing going
Yes.
on here for you, that maybe you'll be doing retreats or things. I don't know. Anyway, it's just my thought.
Yes. I'm gonna receive that, as they
Okay.
said in the used to say in the old church world. I receive it. I receive
Okay.
it.
Okay. Just let it sit and maybe
Yes.
who
No,
knows?
I love it. I love it. That is actually a fantastic idea, and it is definitely right up our alley.
I had a feeling.
Man, yes. Well, man, again, this has been absolutely great. Normally, I have a fancy outro, but I'm
Okay.
on a different platform,
You
so I
are,
don't have a
yes.
fancy outro.
Okay.
Um, Someone sent me another chat. $2 super chat. Drop the bombshell at the end there. Thank you so much, Slug. This has just been a powerful moment. I'm gonna let Dr. Bird go to the back, and then I'll do some closing announcements. Again, Dr. Bird, thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
Thank
And
you.
we're gonna have to do a part 2 on this because, as you saw, I have a lot more
You
questions.
do, and you have good questions. I'd love to talk about them with you. Yep.
Awesome, awesome. Well, again, thank you for hanging out, and we'll see you again soon. All right, everybody, thank you all for hanging out with us today. Okay, I gotta keep my hands down because when my hands go up there, if I move them too fast, it does that, and that's weird. That's gonna make me look. That's gonna make me feel weird. So I'm gonna keep my hands to myself. Do a little trick I learned when I was a kid. Just put them under my armpits. So just sit like this. But anyway, no. Thank you all for hanging out with us today. This has been an excellent conversation. I hope you have pulled something away from this that's helpful for you and how you approach marriage, and not just marriage, but just relationships. Period. I think the hyper focus or the hyper specialization that we put on marriage many times works to our deficit. That it's best to see marriage the way you see any other relationship, is that this you're in a relationship, a partnership with another person, and you and that other person are the definers. You're the architects of what that relationship will ultimately look like, you know. And what's funny is, out of all of the things we've hit today, like, I didn't, again, y'all heard me say it, I didn't expect this conversation to be this funny. But out of everything we've hit today, one of the things I really want you to take home, especially if you are a person who still so happens to be a believer, I was so impressed by the fact that Dr. Bird's work is still targeted to people of faith, because those are the people at this moment whose lives are most harmed by these misunderstandings. My life is no longer harmed by the concepts of biblical marriage. My wife is marked safe from a biblical marriage. You know what I'm saying? My children are marked safe from biblical parenting. All of this needs to be a t-shirt. Damn it. But but so it's not us that for the most part, some of us need it to kind of unpack the trauma, right? But I love the fact that somebody is out there doing the work and helping them understand it in a way that doesn't make them feel like they got to stop being believers, but in a way that helps them that, hey, even while believing this, you can still be a better parent, you can still be a better husband, you can still be a better spouse, you can still be a better partner. And so I am so glad that they are doing that out there. But on this side, I'm so glad that we are marked safe from it. And I hope that we're all able to get something out of this. Maybe even something, if you have somebody that you love who's suffering in an abusive relationship, a loveless relationship, an unproductive relationship, or just stuck in somewhere in their lives because they have a misunderstanding of their religion. Perhaps you could be that little nugget of information based off of learning something from Dr. Bird, or you can get them in connection with Dr. Bird's stuff. You could try to send them my way, but I think my way is a little more offensive than Dr. Bird's. You send the people who are on the fringe of letting go of the belief to me. But the people who still believe, and you still want to protect them, you now have a weapon in your toolbox. You now have something in your toolbox for the people who are believers, and you still care about the health of their relationships. Dr. Bird, that's one hell of a weapon to use. And you saw how knowledgeable she was and how much insight she brought to this conversation today. So thank you all for being here. I didn't even realize so many of you were going to show up today. This has been an incredible stream. Y'all have hung out with me 2 times this week. You hung out with me Friday, and you hung out with me today. I think I need to go. I think that's what I need. I need to go on sabbatical like once, like go on sabbatical for like a month and then just pop up with random lives. But no, I love y'all so much. I hope y'all have a wonderful time. I got to get ready to be on the line within the next hour, I believe. So for those of you who like those shows, hey, I'll be over there and I'll make sure I get that shared out. It'll be me and Matt Dillahunty today, I think. And that'll be at 2:00 Central Standard Time, if I got my time zones right. But I love y'all so much. I appreciate y'all. Thank y'all for sticking with us. I'm hoping to be off a sabbatical within the next, I won't say next few weeks. It's going to be longer than that. But thank y'all for rocking and roll with me. This is brand new. We're still trying to find our feet under us. But I love what we are becoming. So until next time, man, y'all keep rising. I'll holler at you later.